Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Society for Armenian Studies lecture Zoom series. My name is Bedros Dermatosian. I'm the president of the Society for Armenian Studies and associate professor of history at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Today, we're honored to have a very distinguished guest with us, who is the president of one of the most important institutions, Armenian institutions, if not the most important Armenian institution in the diaspora, the bastion of Armenian pride, the bastion of Armenian academia, an institution that played a dominant role in producing major scholars, important intellectuals who contributed to the Armenian communities worldwide. Our distinguished guest today is Reverend Dr. Paul A. Haidostian, who is the president of the prestigious Haigazian University in Beirut. He was appointed as a president in the year 2002. His appointment followed a 9-year teaching career at the Near East School of Theology in Beirut. Dr. Haidostian holds a BA degree in psychology from Haigazian University, a Master of Divinity degree from the Near East School of Theology, a Master of Theology degree and a PhD degree in pastoral theology from the prestigious Princeton Theological Seminary in Princeton, New Jersey. In addition to his local and international leadership responsibilities in educational, ecclesial, and ecumenical organizations, Dr. Haidostian teaches, lectures, and writes in Armenian, Arabic, and English on a wide variety of topics, including Middle Eastern Christianity, Armenian identity, ecumenism, youth, education, social issues, peace, and pastoral theology. He is currently the chair of the Central Committee of the Union of Armenian Evangelical Churches in the Near East, and he is considered one of the most important Armenian scholars and intellectual in the diaspora. It is an honor to welcome you to the Society for Armenian Studies lecture series. Dr. Haidostian, the floor is yours, and is going to talk today about Armenians of the Middle East. Welcome.
Thank you so much for your words of welcome, Dr. Dermatosian. It's great to be with you and with all of you on this forum tonight. I'm in Los Angeles, I'm in Pasadena today, and I greet you wherever you may be. I chose for today a topic that I called Between Loyalty and Disappointment. I wanted to present something about the Armenians of the Middle East without saying how many schools, how many churches, how many clubs we have, what are the numbers, what are the difficulties, economic, political, and other. But I challenged myself from what I know, from what I've seen growing up in a place like Lebanon. And as it's obvious, I've also lived outside Lebanon, but I've been back since 1993. So many of my reflections today are based on what I observe on many levels. As you know, these are extremely challenging days, extremely difficult days, difficult to describe, even difficult for the Lebanese and then Syrians and the Iraqis or whoever Armenians, whatever Armenians there are, to describe their situation. So my topic is Between Loyalty and Disappointment. At an early teenage time, when the Lebanese Civil War had started in 1975, and I was learning to follow the news in Arabic, which I did for most of my life. I started very early to listen and to read the news in Arabic. I was struck by a statement I heard over and over again on the news in a political discussion. And the statement was something like, is Lebanon a final homeland? Is Lebanon a final homeland? Hal Lubnan watan nihai, for those of you who know Arabic. This statement is still heard today, and it is repeated often and at every political juncture. Why would people quote this statement in every crisis, one wonders? Later I learned that this was a citation from the Lebanese constitution drafted in 1926, probably a variation of what other constitutions may mention about their land, about their homeland. And since then, is Lebanon a final homeland? Since then, that I learned, the relationship of the Lebanese citizens with the Republic of Lebanon as one nation, as a republic, has been a major question. Leave alone the relations of the non-Lebanese neighbors with Lebanon. What did this question, is Lebanon the final homeland? What did this question entail? Why is it so loaded? And it is loaded. When did Lebanon become Lebanon? Was always the question. With what borders with Syria? Note here that names of modern-day republics may have roots in ancient history, and the names of Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Israel, Syria may be used today if the mention of Lebanon, for example, in the Bible is there. If Lebanon is mentioned in the Bible and Lebanon today is a republic, the question is, are these the same Lebanon with similar definitions? Is it the same in the 20th century, 21st century, as it was in whatever century the Bible was written? Okay, fine. These names are so common in biblical times, and they are republics today. And that's a big question. Where is the real meaning of a place like Lebanon or Egypt or Syria? So back to Lebanon as one country. Many other questions were present prior to 1943 when Lebanon became independent from France. What demographic components, with what balances constituted Lebanon? This was always an issue. Can demographics ever remain in balance in a place like Lebanon or in any other country? When I say demographic balance, I mean mostly Muslim and Christian. How is independence related to identity? How is independence related to nationhood? Independent supposedly means independent from another. But independence on what road? Was it sufficient to say Lebanon is independent from some other country, but independent on what path? Are there citizens who are more Lebanese than others? Was a Lebanese question. What defines more Lebanese? Is it time that some people came to Lebanon prior to other people? Is it the history of their contribution to the country? Is it local visibility? Is it their numbers, economic status, their language, whether Arabic or non-Arabic? These are complicated questions, I know, that could be repeated in other countries, such as the USA. Who is a real American? Is it only the citizen? Someone could really discuss other issues, but I'm starting with this point because in a loaded area like Lebanon and the Middle East, every single question I ask is a reason for new conflicts. And by the way, again, as I say this about the Middle East, and I come to the USA often, I'm realizing that year after year, some of the same questions are becoming Western questions as well, also in Europe. So I started with the problematic, and I started from Lebanon. But my point is not to discuss Lebanese identity as such, but rather the Armenian presence and belonging in the Middle Eastern lands, including Lebanon. It is also not an easy task to know when a people consider a land they live on their homeland. So we all live on a land, but when is it that it is considered a homeland? And then it is not so easy to understand the meaning of belonging to more than one land and more than one homeland. Belong to a homeland, but in what way? For how long? Under what conditions? How about dual or triple citizenship? Does that represent a compromise to have more than one homeland? Is it a new definition of modern identity that you have more than one homeland? And then is citizenship what defines love of homeland or a country? As I speak about this, you realize I have Armenia and the Armenians in my mind, right? I'm not only talking about the Middle Eastern Armenians. We all know how and why the majority of the Armenians settled in the Middle Eastern lands, such as Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan, and Egypt. It is also clear that for many Armenians who eventually settled in one of these countries, that is for a long time, in contrast to others who stayed in Lebanon or Syria for a few years and then moved very early on. And then some others who settled and they stayed in each country for about 10 years, because I know some of your families would identify with this, but I know of some families who have moved 4 times in a period of 60 years. That is between 1920 from their ancient home, and then Syria, and then Lebanon, and then some other country, and then North America, France, or wherever else. But for some people who settled in one of the countries, say Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, for a long time, there was a sense of trying to make a good home and trying to shape the idea of a homeland in this new Middle Eastern or Arab land. There was this wish to start some notion of a homeland. I'm also aware of the fact that in some countries, Armenians called the new land their home quicker than in other countries. This point, by the way, is a separate study. Why is it that and I will not name countries, not to offend any country, but in some countries it was easier for the Armenians to say, this is my home, than in other countries. So this is an interesting point. But we should not be so quick to say why that happens. It needs a deep analysis about the country specifics. By the way, on every topic that I'm presenting today, it's lots of different points. I do realize that the need for more analysis and research is really there. I'm not sure that we have done enough studies. When we study diaspora identity, for example, we don't necessarily go into the deeper points of what I'm talking about. And I see in the audience, there are also studies from the Republic of Armenia on ethnography, ethnographic institutes visiting different countries and so on. They try to look at some of these allegiances, some of these belongings and the questions, but much more studies are needed in all these points. Now, what percentage of Armenians consider their new country, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, etc., their homeland? And what percentage consider their original towns, say in Cilicia? And what type of a homeland did they consider the old place and the new place is an important question and a very difficult one. Many Armenians had a complex sense of belonging anyway, even in pre-genocide days. So it's, as we raise our children in a place like Lebanon, we may give the impression, or in the USA, that wherever we were pre-1915 or 1909 was really like a complete definition of a homeland. And that in itself, and I do remember, you'll hear me, Dr. Dermatosian mentioned their origins are from Marash. I'm also proud Marashti myself, and I keep repeating that for many good reasons. But I think many people in my generation growing up thought that Marash was in the heart of Armenia, and it was 100% Armenian, and everyone spoke Armenian. We purify the memory, and it's not true, and that's not true about any of the countries. So what percentage considered which one their homeland? What type of a homeland did they mean? Many Armenians, therefore, as I said, had a complex sense of belonging anyway, even in Cilician days. But in their new Middle Eastern homes, they, for a long time, and I'm talking about the majority of the Armenians, were primarily Armenians for the first stage, which was a very long stage. And some even now, that is 100 years after, will consider themselves in their identity as Armenian, primarily Armenian. Part of the value system of these Armenians who were settling in these new homelands, part of the value system was to keep the Armenian first. This in itself was a value promoted. Even if parents didn't necessarily say it in a sentence, everything they were leading their children into meant that they wanted the Armenian to come first. And then secondarily, local citizens of a new country. That was also there, and gradually this increased to become more strategically Lebanese or Syrian or Iraqi and so on. And then, of course, it was Cilicia and their town, original town, and then this new homeland. But there was also this other issue, Armenia in some form. Armenia, whether it was Soviet Armenia or later an independent Armenia, in addition to the others, there was the Armenia question, close to the heart, close to poetry, close to education. Now I move to loyalty. Loyalty, that means a strong quality of faithfulness, a very strong quality of faithfulness, even love. That means more than appreciation or an affinity. Armenians were developing loyalty in their homelands, in many homelands. It is clear that the general approach of the majority Armenian population in the Middle Eastern home included some loyalty that was very genuine, varying in degrees probably from one period to another. They were developing gradually a genuine loyalty to the local land. Aleppo, Syria, Beirut, Lebanon, or whatever other city. Armenians have not only felt and expressed loyalty in these new lands, as refugees, as new settlers, when they felt welcome, when they felt they had opportunity to start life again and to build and rebuild and excel, they made an impression on themselves and on those around them that Armenians are loyal citizens of this new country. In fact, Armenians felt proud that they were competing in loyalty with those who had been Lebanese or Syrians or Iraqis for long centuries. All knew that Armenians had the character of holding on to more than one subject of loyalty, however. So say in Syria and Lebanon, everyone knew that the Armenians had a complicated sense of loyalty and that they were loyal to also somewhere else. Multiple loyalties, let me say. Multiple loyalties were not considered as problematic by the Armenians in general. They didn't find a conflict. The fact that the Armenian language was used and understood by the Armenians in their inner circles, and Armenian was used as a primary language in many of the Arab countries for the Armenians, this gave the Armenian communities in the Middle Eastern lands additional freedoms to maintain and develop multiple loyalties. So you have a loyalty in the Armenian language, a loyalty in the Arabic language, a loyalty in between languages, which is an interesting dynamic. The Armenian strong sense of history was also a contributing factor to that loyalty. It was not strange, for example, and listen to this interesting example, which I've seen a lot. It was not strange, for example, for an Armenian organization to print a pamphlet for a Saint Vartan event with two opening words or opening forwards in front of the pamphlet. One was in the Armenian language, the other one is in Arabic. The foreword, the opening word of the program pamphlet in Armenian, talked about the meaning of Vartanants, the battle and the heroic story was told. And then next to it was an Arabic opening word to that event. In the opening word, that event, without naming it, was dedicated to the country, to the rulers of that land. And it praised the political system with no mention to the real content of the event. So that was a Vartanants story in Armenian, but in Arabic, it made the impression, or it gave the impression, that it is also giving tribute to someone else, the country and its system. Somehow, the organizers felt no contradiction between the two. The authorities felt that the Armenians were abiding by the law anyway, and they were loyal to the country. And this additional baggage of the Armenians, as long as it didn't contradict the politics of the rulers, was okay. And for the Armenians, the organizers felt they were doing justice to both loyalties. With time and with the new generations, this question of multiple loyalties became more sophisticated and sometimes problematic for the young generation. For most Armenians in our lands in the Middle East, who had formed their communities post-genocide, it was a rather long process to shape a local, country-specific identity that was considered by the locals as similar to that of the majority. Accepting the newcomers was not the main issue in most countries in the Middle East in the 1920s, let's say. Even though demographic changes in some areas, like the city of Beirut, was found problematic by certain Muslim groups who thought now that the Armenian vote would create a Christian vote in the city of Beirut and counterbalance the Muslim vote. But that fear had mostly subsided quite easily. According to some other stories we have heard, in some circles, let's say in Aleppo, when many Armenians joined, local Christians, Arab Christians in Aleppo, would consider the newcoming Armenians as a lower class. Of course, that changed too very quickly as well. Armenians in their new homes, while keeping a high degree of allegiance to their origins, gradually tried to consider this new home a real homeland. Of course, with not a very specific definition of homeland. Up to this day, in our church prayers, say in Beirut, where I am, up to this day, in many of the church prayers, when the pastor prays for the homeland, Hayrenik, dear Lord, we pray for our homeland, Hayrenik. What the pastor means is Armenia. And yet, I am sure that in the current generation, some may not really understand it this way and may have a different view. By homeland, they may understand Lebanon. Time does that and will do that more. I have a story from the financial aid office at Haigazian University. I think it was 2 or 3 years after I had started in my position. When the financial aid officer asks the Armenian applicant, when they're filling the forms, financial aid forms, they ask the applicants what their origins are. She means, are you Hajansi? Are you Aintabsi? Are you Marashsi? Are you I don't know what? Why? Because we have specific scholarships for some of the descendants of these people. So when the financial aid officer asks them, they would usually know. Now, in the past 15 years, this has become problematic for those of you who know Lebanon. So you ask the person, where are you from? Where's your family from? They might say Antilias, Zahle, or somewhere else. they wouldn't understand that you mean somewhere prior to the genocide, right? You were originally your parents. So the generations have been changing, thus the concept of homeland, nationhood, and so on. Now, I know for a fact that for most of us, when we are asked about our identity, as I said, we would say Armenians from Lebanon, Armenian Lebanese, Armenian Syrians, and so on. The question from local Arabs as to whether we were Armenians first or Lebanese or Syrians first is also common up to this day. For example, even prior to the Armenian independence, the second independence, Arabs would ask an Armenian, would you one day go back to Armenia? And Armenians would say in Lebanon and Syria, yeah, but this Armenia was not where I came from. That was the response they gave. Now the response has been nuanced with dual citizenship and other questions. Now, I think it was in the year 2000, 21 years ago, during the Lebanese parliamentary elections, that I remember hearing for the first time on the radio in Arabic an Armenian politician who was asked about his origins and his identity. Are you Armenian or Lebanese? And this political hopeful said, and I had heard it for the very first time, and I'm a listener of politics for a long time. I heard this member candidate say, I am Lebanese with an Armenian origin. See, till the year 2000, I had not heard that publicly by an Armenian, saying that in an Arab country. Now, let me return to the question of loyalty or loyalties. Autobiographically and through observations, I have noted such loyalties we have developed as to our original town, as I said, where we came from. And the other Marash story I have is the following. For example, when I was a child, I knew that my father was a pastor and a school principal. I knew that he had a desk and there was a locker in it. There was a locked drawer. And we never knew till one day we found out that there were envelopes with cash and with lists of Marashi school children in different schools in Lebanon. So I knew that this most famous place was for a precious cause to support the Marashi kids. So as a child, I knew that was something sacred in our parents' home. Okay, so when we talked about the loyalties that we developed in the Middle Eastern lands, loyalty to the original home, loyalty to the church denomination, Armenian church denomination in the Cilician community, that is in whatever Cilician lands we belong to. In our case, we belong to the Third Armenian Evangelical Church of Marash. Another one would mention something in Urfa, in Hajan, and so on. So there was a loyalty to that one back there. And then there was a loyalty to the new church or denomination that had joined in the Middle East. There was a loyalty to an Armenian political party often or an organization. There was loyalty to the language and in some cases, some Armenian dialects. There was a loyalty to Armenian history and its festivities and traditions. There was loyalty to family history in its depth. There was then loyalties to many new things that were developing. New local stories were developing that required loyalty. And these started from neighborhoods, newspapers, loyalty to a newspaper, loyalty to a school that we founded, loyalty to this, loyalty to that. But then gradually, in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and other countries, the Armenians were developing some new types of loyalties, which had to do with the locale, with the place where they lived, or local organizations they were serving in, or to the country, or to a local political entity. And then, of course, gradually the sense of loyalty to Armenia as a spiritual concept, as a historical concept, changed with this independence that came. And so then Armenians started developing a new sense of loyalty to a republic called Armenia. Now, could these loyalties be always complementary? Would you see any conflict between these loyalties? Probably yes, there are conflicts. How did these reflect on the outer image of the Armenian or the inner feelings of the Armenian? What impressions did we give in the Middle East as Armenians with so many of these loyalties? As people who are colorless, opportunistic? No, I don't think so. But there was a critical issue. For most locals in the Middle East countries, the Armenians did not have enough local color. It's not that they didn't have color, but that they didn't have enough local color, local like the others. Another important aspect of community life was and is how to educate the new generation vis-a-vis all these types of loyalties that we describe. So this Armenian apostolic family, who was from a political party, who read a certain newspaper, who sent their kids to a certain school, etc., wanted to give an education to the next generation that looked like the previous one, and with its institutions. Of course, the independence of Armenia and of Artsakh eventually created new dynamics that came into the story. Armenia suddenly was bringing something that was feeling, to some people at least, or a majority even, something purer in a more easy way. And I'll give examples. I remember growing up in Lebanon, we had a struggle with coming up with new Armenian songs, love songs, folk songs, whatever songs. And then suddenly there was Armenia, and it opened up. Plus technology opened up, television and so on. So now the Lebanese singers went jobless because Armenia had better songs, better developed music, or better arranged music, and it was accessible. And you could invite the singer from Armenia and the artist from Armenia. So Armenia was presenting something stronger and purer, as I said, and that sent its impact. And it was influencing some of the activity, but eventually some of the loyalties. As some Armenians in the Middle East were losing some of the local pride, they were gaining some Armenia pride from the Republic. But the love of the previous homeland in the Middle East was not evaporating at all. So it's not like they were selling Lebanon and selling the other one and so on and going to another easily. Dual citizenship laws in Armenia and the emigration of the Middle East Armenians to Western lands raised other sets of questions. An Armenian religious leader during an event at Haigazian once said, "We Armenians are like gypsies. We are always looking, moving. We have low degree of attachment to a habitat." I didn't challenge him. I'm not sure that's true. Maybe some of it is true. If loyalty is free from the concept of land, then the home aspect of homeland means what? It's simply a memory, a spiritual memory, something others keep and we get spiritual nourishment from. So, and friends, I don't know, I mean, who from in my audience today, viewership is from what background? I mean, I know some, but I'll say the following. Quite often, I hear from people who have emigrated out of Lebanon and gone to another land. They would expect Lebanon to keep the highest standards of everything. And then they would criticize, why is my political party in Lebanon or my church or my school not doing better than this? Well, because it lost people. because it lost power, because it lost resources. So what is homeland? The same is true about Armenia. When people leave Armenia and come to the USA, go to Europe or go elsewhere, and they still expect Armenia to do the best. Yeah, but I took something away, so that means it will change. Now, these are interesting dynamics. We have to also be self-critical about these. But the concept of home, free of the land, there's no homeland without land issue, I consider important. Now, why do people leave a homeland and left the Middle East homeland and still leave the Middle East homeland? And by the way, not only the Middle East homeland, I mean, let's be frank about this. I believe in many other countries, bigger numbers leave their homeland as well, including Armenia. But why did people leave homeland? Due to pressures of living, pressures economic, military, and so on, or the allure of opportunity and a better socioeconomic status? Many people left Lebanon and Syria during their wars, but maybe equal numbers left Lebanon and are leaving Syria due to economic trouble. So for some families, it was easier to stand the war than to stand economic collapse. So why do people leave? Why did people leave their places? Departure is due to only war conditions or dire economic situations? Maybe both. But what about loyalty to Arab countries? We praise the Arab countries. That's our home, we say. So is there loyalty involved or lack of it? And we have asked whether others will be more loyal than we are, whether an Arab is more loyal to Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq and Jordan than the Armenian is. I think this topic is a social debate more than anything else. So to close the loyalty part, Armenians consider themselves in the Middle East as having given much to the Middle East as well. We did receive much, but we gave much, we think. And loyalty for the Armenians in our countries in the Middle East meant giving, building, creating peaceful ways, creativity, advancement, development. Was this enough loyalty? Maybe it was. But then I come to the disappointments. So all this story about the Middle Eastern lands and the Armenians, but now the disappointments in multiple ways, sometimes even regrets that we see in Armenians of the Middle East. You build and it gets destroyed. You start again and you lose again. You dream and it gets shattered. The Armenian disappointment with local Middle Eastern conditions has been very heavy over the years, from different countries and from many communities. But much of this was not related to the Armenians themselves, but it had to do with the country as such, and it wasn't like something against the Armenians. Do we usually turn these disappointments to more action within the country, more political involvement? Usually as Armenians, we do not. Usually we do not invest in moving more and more into the local country in the Middle East and correcting the situation. And then the result is we have to leave. And not only the political situation, as I said. But Armenian disappointment, and let me be very frank, is also voiced in relation to Armenian leadership or guidance in the diasporan countries. So we cannot only blame the government of Syria, conditions of Syria, Lebanon and it's this and that, and Iraq and Jordan and Egypt and so on. Often there is disappointment with leadership as well. I grew up hearing about those in Lebanon when I was, and the civil war started. I grew up hearing about those leaders with green cards in their pockets who would leave us at the first difficulty. I remember this when I was 13. And I think as a teenager, I felt so disappointed. I felt so weak. What do you mean my leadership has green cards and the minute they have difficulty, they leave? How about the regular people, cardless people, green cardless people? or people with no other options? I used to ask these questions when I was 14 and 15. And this was a disappointment. But disappointment is also about leaderships that do not always have the best preparation or the interest to lead, or are too busy with internal conflicts or internal competition or self-promotion. In the face of disappointment, young people especially become inactive in community leadership and community matters. Now, in the same frankness, let me continue. Disappointment with Armenia was also there alongside the pride with Armenia. Disappointment with Armenia at a number of levels was also there and has been renewed often. These are also subjective matters, and we cannot be all in agreement regarding Armenia. But a significant number of Armenians from the Middle Eastern lands did and still do voice disappointment regarding Armenia. Why? Is it due to our diversity in many lands that we have diverse expectations of Armenia? Is it our high levels of expectation, high standards, unfortunate political climates, unsatisfactory performance of the country and its leadership, or maybe it's all of the above? For a significant part of the Middle Eastern Armenians, the current Armenia, despite the many good efforts as well, was a disappointment. Dual citizenship created a good sense of pride and facilitated many lives. It provided dual citizenship, I know, in the Middle Eastern countries, more than in other countries, provided fresh air. Some of you may already know this, but the Middle Eastern Armenians had this complex that on their passport, you had Arabic written. And when you traveled, when people saw Arabic letters, they suspected you. So now they had the option of having a passport with no Arabic letters on it. It was an opportunity. Unfortunately, this opportunity turned into becoming opportunistic as well. And many Armenians from the Middle East considered Armenia and its citizenship as a stepping stone for something better westwards. Unfortunately, this topic is also politicized, and the debates have not been leading to better understanding. So we need to be really very frank and objective about these positives and negatives of the same issue. Now, in the last section closing, in the current times, therefore, I have come to a few conclusions, some simple conclusions. Between the multiple loyalties, the Armenians of the Middle East are now making choices in more dreadful ways than before. These may include lower standards of living, lowering standards of living, emigrating with no concrete plan, leaving countries with no expectations elsewhere. This is, I think, a dangerous trend with this multiple loyalties. I'm Lebanese, I'm Syrian, I'm Iraqi, but I'm also Armenian, and I'm also this, I'm also Protestant, and I'm also Catholic, and so on. And then you just, so what do you do among all of these things? You may do some of the things I said. Another conclusion, turning into highly dependent people on outsiders, on Armenian organizations who support us for basic sustenance. Middle Eastern populations are turning more and more dependent financially and otherwise for basic sustenance. And in this, I have another potential danger. When people are in a dire economic situation, they may turn elsewhere, not Armenia. I do, and I cannot give details, but over my 19 plus years, now my 20th year at Haigazian, in a number of occasions, I heard about non-Armenian political organizations willing to pay the tuition of an Armenian student at Haigazian, a needy student. Now, it's not that we weren't giving them financial aid, but this person had also other contacts political context, and okay, fine, they're free, people are giving money, but then knowing Lebanon, and I know what I'm saying, I started worrying about some situations. So when you lower the economic status, new types of dangers, of new loyalties and new allegiances are created. Another conclusion, using the Armenian component of their identity conditionally. That is, some Armenians will use the Armenian component of their identity conditionally, as long as being Armenian provides a visa to something better, literal visa or hypothetical visa to something better. I'm also left with more questions. I asked lots of questions too today, and more than answers maybe. What new loyalties are developing, I asked. What will replace the somewhat traditional components of identity these people grew up with in the Middle East, especially when they leave the Middle East to places like Europe and North America and Australia? Can multiple loyalties go undetected in our cyber days? Can we repeat, for example, I'll say, if I write something on Facebook, it will automatically translate it. I cannot only write it to the Armenians, someone else will translate it and read it as well. So cyber issues are also developing new challenges. How much of the loyalty will remain to whatever is Armenian? Will it give priority to the Armenian? For what good purposes will loyalties be created for the new Armenian in the new land outside the Middle East? How much of the natural assimilation process will have its impact on the Armenian communities of the Middle East? One very encouraging piece of this puzzle is that the Armenian world is still active when it comes to global support of everything Armenian. Is there enough capital and preparedness in the Armenian field to do all of that? Not always. But the Middle East Armenians have seen in many ways how their loyal positions in the Middle East are still appreciated by the local governments and citizens of Lebanon and Syria and Iraq and Jordan and Egypt. The Armenians are still regarded highly and appreciated due to the loyalty and the quality of their life. Now, another positive point is that Armenians, despite the disappointments, have been tremendously encouraged by the support of the wider Armenian community outside the Middle East, including Armenia's support. To end this presentation, I should add that I'm not talking about the Middle East Armenians as a matter of the past. The way we should evaluate the Middle East and its Armenians is not the comparison with the past, nor the extreme conditions of today, but all the good these communities continue to do and prepare for the local communities, for the local Armenian identities, for Armenia, and for what they could do for all of us around the globe. And I assure you, there is much more in the Armenian Middle East than we give a chance for. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Reverend Dr. Haidostian. Again, this was a fascinating lecture by the president of the Haigazian University. And I'm going to stop the recording here and